Arkansas's triple execution was the first in the United States in 32 years, and it accounted for a third of the 9 inmates the state has executed since 1976. With only one exception, a double execution by Arkansas in May. The other 246 prisoners executed in the last 18 years have gone to their deaths individually. Arkansas prison officials argued that the multiple executions were more efficient and produced less strain on prison workers than individual executions. Nobody wants to get up in the morning and go kill somebody. For the previous week, guards had rehearsed the process in 15 steps. The lethal injections began at 7 p.m. and were repeated at about 1-hour intervals in a small concrete block room at the Cummins unit of the state prison system. The order of the executions was originally scheduled according to prisoner numbers. That plan had to be abandoned when a federal court temporarily stayed the execution of the man who was supposed to die second. On the night of August 3, 1994, 3 inmates of the Arkansas Department of Correction were put to death at the Cummins unit for their participation in the same crime. Convicted of a murder and robbery committed in Rogers on January 8, 1981, the 3 men were executed at 1-hour intervals. On the night of January 8, 1981, the home of Donald Lehman and his family was the scene of a home invasion. 4 masked men rang the doorbell and burst into the home. At least 2 were armed with handguns, and a third carried a chain. Lehman was thrown into his bedroom and repeatedly shot and struck with the chain, killing him. Lehman's wife and daughter were present in the house during the incident. After an undetermined time in the home, the 4 robbers fled with more than $1,200 in cash and a gun collection. The first suspect, Darrell Richley, was arrested on January 9th in Fayetteville, Washington County, on a charge of criminal impersonation. A search of Richley's car led to the discovery of several firearms believed to have been stolen from the Lehman home. This initial arrest led to the capture of James William Holmes, Hoyt Clines, and Michael Orndorff on charges related to the robbery and murder. Charged with capital murder and 2 counts of armed robbery, the 4 defendants were put on trial in September 1981 in Benton County. The 4 men were convicted of all charges on October 30th and sentenced to death. Witnesses testified that the men had boasted a week earlier at a party that they were planning to rob some rich old in the town where Lehman lived and might have to kill him. Several execution dates were set over the next decade, but appeals prevented the state from moving forward. The convictions were affirmed by the Arkansas Supreme Court in July 1983, with a 5-2 decision. The 2 dissenting justices argued that Orndorff deserved a lesser sentence than the other 3 defendants. Additional appeals continued in both state and federal court. Orndorff saw some success in 1994 when the state was ordered to either resentence him to life without parole or hold a new penalty phase. This development arose after appellate attorneys discovered that Lehman's daughter changed her initial statement after being hypnotized. During the original trial, Orndorff was found to have a mitigating circumstance during the penalty phase, but received the death penalty anyway. The state decided against holding a resentencing hearing, and he received a sentence of life without parole. The state set an execution date of August 3, 1994. The executions took place over a 3-hour period, Each of the 3 convicts was allowed to choose between the electric chair and lethal injection. All 3 chose lethal injection. The original order of the executions was based on the inmate number of the trio, which was also alphabetical by last name. On Wednesday night, August 3, 1994, each man in turn stepped out of his cell and lay down on prison's only gurney. They were strapped down and wheeled about 30 feet to the death chamber, where they were injected with a fatal mixture. Clines entered the execution chamber at 7 p.m. He was pronounced dead at 7:11. The execution of Holmes was postponed as a last-minute appeal was launched. In response to this late-breaking development, the execution of Richley was moved up to 8 o'clock. He was pronounced dead at 8:07. Holmes was pronounced dead at 9:24. All 3 declined to make final statements. Earlier, before their executions, in a joint last appeal, the inmates had argued this scheduled mass execution, by reducing human beings to hogs at the slaughter, will exponentially increase the level of fear, uncertainty and psychological stress that someone condemned normally experiences in the usual course of events. All 3 men were executed in a small white concrete room, called the Arkansas Death Chamber, that has an adjacent viewing room. Each man walked into the chamber, was laid down on the chamber's one gurney, his head and hands strapped down with leather restraints. The bodies were removed in body bags after the executions. All 3 had chosen lethal injection over electrocution. The 3 were originally to have been executed in the order of their prison serial numbers: Clines SK 886, Holmes SK 887, Richley SK 888. But prison officials dropped Holmes to 3rd while his final appeal was being considered. The triple execution is one more manifestation of increasing public support in opinion polls for the death penalty in the United States. Multiple executions were resumed in May, when Arkansas executed 2 men whose convictions were unrelated. Such executions were the norm in the United States until the 1960s. Familiar to many Americans in images such as photographs of the public mass hangings of the conspirators in the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. The largest multiple execution, according to figures from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, involved 8 people in Virginia in 1951. 17 different states had executed 4 or more. In most states, opposition to the death penalty also has become a major political liability for politicians. It was a major factor in helping California's Dianne Feinstein win the Democratic nomination for her seat over former state Attorney General John Van de Kamp in 1992. It is also emerging as an issue in the governor's race between incumbent Pete Wilson, a death penalty supporter, and Democrat Kathleen Brown, who has had reservations about it for years. Brown has softened her opposition, declaring that she would enforce the state's death penalty. Only 8 protesters showed up outside the Cummins Unit Correctional Facility here for Wednesday's executions. Another 40 protested by candlelight at the governor's mansion in Little Rock. Many law enforcement officials, however, favor multiple executions because of their efficiency and cost savings. Multiple executions save the taxpayers a considerable amount of money. Arkansas officials have said multiple executions reduce overtime and stress on employees. Nobody wants to get up in the morning and go kill somebody. The death sentence for Orndorff, the fourth defendant, was overturned when it was discovered that Vicky Lehman's testimony differed under hypnosis from her earlier recollections. When the Lehman family said it did not wish to endure another sentencing hearing, the state agreed that Orndorff be sentenced to life without parole. The Supreme Court declined to hear clemency appeals from the three. Thank you for watching Death Row.